My mother-in-law threw the divorce papers directly onto the glass table right in front of me, right in the middle of the grand, chandelier-lit ballroom of our 5th wedding anniversary party. With her hands on her hips, she pointed a manicured finger at my face, spewing venomous insults. She called me a barren, useless woman who only knew how to leech off the Vance family. My husband casually wrapped his arm around the waist of his young, supposedly pregnant mistress as they swaggered into the room. They thought I would fall to my knees, crying and begging, but I didn't. I calmly picked up a pen, signed my name, smiled, and picked up my phone. That night, the cool breeze from the Hudson River blew into the ballroom of the Pluck, 5-star Manhattan restaurant. Golden light from the crystal chandeliers cascaded over elegant tables draped in pristine white silk. On each table sat extravagant centerpieces of imported fresh red roses, filling the room with a sweet fragrance. The guest list consisted of heavy hitters in the New York business world, extended family members, and crucial partners of my husband's company. Today was the 5th anniversary of the day Julian Vance and I tied the knot. I was the one who chose this exclusive venue. I was the one who curated the premium menu, featuring beluga caviar, wagyu beef, and Maine lobster. I wanted to surprise my husband, to make him look good in front of his associates. Little did I know, the ultimate surprise was waiting for me. I stood tucked away in a dimly lit corner near the cocktail bar, scanning the room. Julian, looking dapper in a tailored black Tom Ford tuxedo, was holding a tailored glass of Pinot Noir, mingling from table to table, laughing loudly. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, was wearing a blindingly sparkly designer evening gown, a massive string of pearls around her neck, and a diamond ring flashing on her finger. Everywhere she went, she boasted about her brilliant, exceptional son. She told anyone who would listen that the Vance family must be blessed by God to have produced a CEO as talented as Julian. The relatives chimed in, flattering her to the heavens. Not a single one of them mentioned my name. Not a single one remembered that I, the wife, was standing alone in the corner. In the eyes of the Vance family, Victoria Tori Sterling was just an orphaned girl who got lucky and struck gold by marrying their precious heir. Over the past 3 years, ever since Julian's company started making millions, Eleanor's attitude toward me had done a 180. From passive-aggressive tolerance, she shifted to blatant contempt and mockery. At every family dinner, she would drop hints that I was a parasite, a jinx hindering her son's rise to the top. She criticized my simple, understated style as too low class for a CEO's wife. But the most painful part was how she constantly used the fact that we hadn't had a child in 5 years to torment me. She had no idea that the reason we didn't have children was because Julian was sterile. I was the one who quietly took him to top-tier specialists. I was the one who bought expensive supplements and hid the medical records to protect his fragile ego. Yet, he stood by and let his mother humiliate me. Day after month, year after year, I bit my lip and endured it all. I quietly managed the household, cooked gourmet meals, and silently absorbed my greater mother-in-law's verbal abuse. I endured it not because I was a coward, but because I was blindly in love with Julian. I always remembered the terrible fire at the upstate lumberyard years ago. Amidst the suffocating, roaring flames, it was Julian who rushed in and carried me out. From the moment he saved my life, I swore to myself that I would spend the rest of my days repaying that debt. Because of that life-saving grace, I willingly hid my true identity. No one in the Vance family, not even Julian, knew that I was actually the founder and CEO of Vanguard Holdings, one of the most powerful private equity firms on Wall Street. The tens of millions of dollars used to fund Julian's startup, the luxurious Long Island estate his family currently lived in, the fleet of luxury cars they drove, every single cent came out of my pocket. I used proxy investors and shell companies to inject capital and secure massive contracts for his firm. I wanted him to stand on his own 2 feet. I wanted him to have the confidence of a self-made, successful man. I thought my silent sacrifices would buy me a happy, peaceful home. Instead, I had been feeding a snake, digging my own grave. At exactly 8 p.m., the gala officially began. The smooth jazz music faded as the MC stepped onto the stage, inviting CEO Julian Vance and his wife to give a prosent speech. I was just about to step out of the shadows when the grand oak doors of the ballroom suddenly burst open. All eyes darted toward the entrance. My heart stopped. Julian didn't walk toward the stage. Instead, he was strolling in from the lobby, his arm wrapped tightly around the waist of a beautiful, unfamiliar young woman. Her name was Chloe. She wore a skin-tight cherry red silk dress, heavy glamorous makeup, and a haughty smile. The most striking shade is Avermislius lies. Detail was the visible bump at her midsection, which she kept rubbing and caressing affectionately. The entire ballroom fell dead silent. Hundreds of people stared in shock, entirely confused by what was unfolding. Then, the whispers began, buzzing like a swarm of bees. I stood rooted to the spot, my fingers gripping the fabric of my dress so tightly my knuckles turned white. The crystal champagne flute in my hand nearly slipped and shattered on the floor. I couldn't believe my eyes. The man I had loved and provided for over the last 5 years, the man I had drained my resources to elevate, was now openly parading his pregnant mistress at our anniversary party. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, didn't look surprised at all. She glided through the Balinor crowd, walked right up to Chloe, and grabbed her hands, beaming like she'd won the lottery. Turning to face the stunned crowd, she announced loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, since our lovely family and esteemed partners are all gathered here tonight, the Vance family would like to share some wonderful news. We are expecting a grandson. My future daughter-in-law here is 4 months pregnant. From today onward, Chloe will officially be part of the Vance family." Every word out of her mouth was like a dagger twisting in my chest. I gasped for air, my lungs burning, a wave of sickening humiliation rising in my throat. Stepping out of the darkness, I walked straight toward them. My stiletto heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing with a chilling rhythm. Seeing me approach, the crowd naturally parted to make way. I looked Julian dead in the eye, my voice trembling slightly but fighting to blink. "Stay composed. Julian, explain this. Do you even remember what today is?" Julian looked at me with an icy, apathetic stare that made my blood run cold. He pulled his hand away from his mistress's waist, shoved both hands into his, quote, pockets, and lifted his chin arrogantly. "Tori, stop playing the victim. We've been married for 5 years, and you haven't given me a single child. The Vance family line cannot end with me. Look at Chloe. She's young, beautiful, obedient, and she's carrying my flesh and blood. I am the CEO of a major corporation. I need a wife who matches my status, and I need an heir. Since we're already here, let's just end this quietly." Chloe leaned into Julian, feigning a delicate, fragile demeanor. She spoke in a prose/and a whiny, syrupy voice. "I'm so sorry, Tori, but you can't help who you love." Julian said, "Living with you is suffocating. You're old, you come from nothing, and you can't even give him a baby. Why are you so stubbornly holding on to him? Just let him go so the baby in my belly can have a real family." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. I looked at the familiar faces around the room. Julian's uncle, his aunts, his cousins. The very people who, whenever they were broke or needed business loans, would come crying and begging me for help. Today, they stood there with their arms crossed, watching me get humiliated, without saying a single word in my defense. Someone even muttered under their breath, "A woman who shoots blanks is useless. She deserves to be dumped. What is she even crying about?" Eleanor marched over to a VIP table and grabbed a blue folder she had prepared in advance. She walked back and slammed it onto the glass table right in front of me. 2 bold, capitalized words stared back at me. Divorce agreement. She put her hands on her hips, pointing her diamond-clad finger at my face, and shrieked, "Look closely, you little brat. You married my son, leeched off my family for 5 years, drained his money, and couldn't even pop out a grandchild. Keeping a barren woman like you around is just bad luck. Sign these papers right now, in front of everyone. You will pack your bags and leave my house with nothing but the clothes on your back. The house, the cars, the money, they are all the results of my son's blood, sweat, and tears. Don't even think about taking a single dime." I looked at the divorce papers, then at the triumphant faces of my mother-in-law, my husband, and his mistress. The air in the ballroom felt heavy and suffocating. A surge of absolute, unadulterated fury ignited in my chest, incinerating all the weakness and blind love of the past 5 years. My tears had dried up long ago. The silence engulfed the room. I was quiet, not because I was resigning myself to my fate, but because I was finally seeing through the despicable, greedy, and ungrateful nature of this family. I remembered the sleepless nights I spent rewriting Julian's business plans. I remembered running around in the rain and snow, pulling strings, and using my connections to save his company when his company partners backed out. I remembered the secret $20 million wire transfer I sent to his corporate account to save him from bankruptcy. It turned out that all my sacrifices were viewed as garbage. They drank my blood, chewed my bones, and now they wanted to kick me to the curb to bring a gold digger home to enjoy my empire. Seeing my silence, Eleanor assumed I was terrified. She pressed her advantage, stomping her foot. "Why are you just standing there, you useless trash? Sign it. Or do you want me to have security throw you out? Julian is being generous. In enough to give you a $2,000 Uber fare back to whatever trailer park you came from. Take it and go find another sucker." Julian smirked, a look of pure disdain on his face. "Tori, don't stall. If you sign it like a good girl, I'll have accounting wire you another $5,000. Consider it severance pay. Don't make a scene and embarrass me in front of my Lonand partners. These are high-level executives. You can't afford to offend them." Hearing the word partners made me want to laugh even louder. He had absolutely no idea that the high-level executives he was desperately trying to impress were actually managing directors of subsidiary firms owned by my holding Lote Credo company. They weren't here out of respect for Julian Vance. They were here out of respect for me, the hidden chairman backing his entire sham of a company. I took a deep breath, smoothing out the wrinkles in my silk gown. The agonizing pain and resentment gradually gave way to a cold, razor-sharp clarity. I slowly reached out and picked up the Mont Blanc pen resting next to the papers. The entire ballroom held its breath. Julian's eyes gleamed with smug victory. Eleanor let out a throaty chuckle, reveling in her triumph. Chloe stroked her belly with a mocking grin. They thought I had surrendered. They thought I accepted my fate as a drained prey, but they were wrong, dead wrong. I uncapped the pen, flipped straight to the final page of the agreement, and, without a tremor in my hand, without a single tear, I decisively signed Victoria Sterling in large, bold letters. Once done, I slammed the pen down onto the glass, producing a sharp, piercing crack. I picked up the papers and threw them directly at Julian's chest. The pages fluttered and scattered at his feet. Eleanor hastily bent down, picked up the signature page, checked it, and let out a boisterous laugh. "Excellent. Good. To see you know your place. Now get the hell out of here. I'll have the maid. Throw your cheap clothes in the dumpster tomorrow. Don't you dare show your face at our estate again." I stood up straight, my entire aura shifting. I was no longer the meek, enduring, poor wife. My eyes, sharp as scalpel blades, swept across the wanted, despicable faces of the Vance family. My silence now was the silence of the eye, 18 of a hurricane before it obliterates everything in its path. People in that ballroom began to feel the chilling, lethal energy radiating from me. Several of the partners, my executives, began to shift nervously in their seats, breaking into cold sweats as they realized I was switching to offensive mode. I reached into my designer clutch and pulled out my latest foldable smartphone. Unlocking the screen, I slowly dialed a familiar number. My voice rang out across the vast ballroom, crystal clear but chilling to the bone. They had pushed me to the edge of the cliff. They couldn't blame me for being ruthless. The act of playing poor to test human nature was over. It was time for the queen to take back her crown. I picked up a glass of deep red Merlot and splashed it directly into Julian's face. The dark liquid dripped from his slicked-back hair, staining his pristine white dress shirt, and pooled onto his expensive Italian leather shoes. The massive ballroom plunged into a terrifying silence. The jazz music had been cut off at some point. Every eye was locked on me, the woman who, just a minute ago, was viewed as a useless parasite. Eleanor stood frozen like a statue. She couldn't believe her eyes. The obedient, a daughter-in-law, who had swallowed every insult for years, had just thrown wine in her golden boy's face. Chloe yanked her hand back and took a step away, her eyes wide with fake panic. Julian wiped his face, veins bulging at his temples. He gritted his teeth, took a step forward, and raised his hand as if to strike me. But before he could even swing, I stepped back, My eyes met his, piercing through his cowardice like daggers. I raised my voice, every word striking like a hammer, echoing through the Retta's luxurious, hypocritical space. The mansion you live in, the company you're embezzling from, the luxury car you drove to pick up this mistress every single. A bit of it was paid for by me. Did you think I was stupid? Did you actually think you were a brilliant businessman standing on your own 2 feet? Without me, you are nothing but a pack of beggars dressed in designer clothes. Hearing this, Eleanor erupted in a blind rage. Recovering her shock, she stomped forward, pointing her diamond ring right at my nose. Are you insane? What kind of circus act is this? Your money? You walked into my family and orphaned street. Rat. You couldn't even rub 2 dimes together, and now you're claiming the Vance family assets are yours? Jealousy has literally made you psychotic. Julian let out a condescending scoff, flicking his wet lapel. He looked at me, with a mix of pity and disgust. Tori, are you done acting? Are you trying to get attention, trying to cling to me by making up these psychotic delusions? Do? You think the people here are toddlers? Knock it off. I gave you an out. Don't make me call security to drag you out like a stray dog. I didn't bother responding to him. I wasn't going to waste another drop of saliva on this rotting family. I held my phone up. Every eye tracked my movements. I dialed Nathan, my chief operating officer at Vanguard Holdings. He picked up after the first ring. His respectful, professional voice came through. Yes, Miss Sterling. I'm on the line. I put the phone on speaker, turning the volume all the way up. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I issued my orders clearly. Nathan, execute. Operation Phoenix immediately. Revoke all executive powers, freeze all capital, flows, and sever every supply chain contract linked to Julian Vance's company. Notify HR to terminate every single Vance family member employed at any Vanguard subsidiary. Freeze all secondary black cards I opened under Julian and Eleanor's names. Do it tonight, not a second's delay. From the other end of the line, the response was sharp and decisive. Understood, Miss Sterling. All legal paperwork was prepped a week ago. Initiating now. I hung up. A smirk played on the corner of my lips. I casually scanned the faces, one of the people standing before me. Julian still maintained his half-smile, but the corner of his eye began to twitch. Eleanor spat on the polished floor and shrieked. Who the hell did you just call to put on this little play? Vanguard Holdings? Who do you think you are, impersonating the executives of the biggest private equity firm in the city? You need a mental hospital. Her arrogance didn't last long. Less than 2 minutes after I ended the call, a chaotic symphony of ringtones shattered the silence of the party. It wasn't just one phone. Dozens of phones across the ballroom were ringing simultaneously. The phone in Julian's pocket buzzed violently. He pulled it out, seeing his CFO's name on the caller ID. The moment he put the phone to his ear, the smugly pink color drained from his face, leaving him as white as a sheet of paper. The panicked screaming from the other end was so loud I could hear it clearly, from 6 feet away. Julian! We're dead! Vanguard just sent an emergency. Cease and desist and pulled all funding. The banks just froze our corporate accounts. Our biggest partners are terminating their contracts simultaneously. We're bankrupt. It's over, Julian. We're completely under. The phone slipped from Julian's hand, bounced off the edge of the table, and shattered on the floor. His eyes rolled back slightly, his jaw dropped, and his entire body shook like a man who had just seen a demon rise from hell. He stumbled backward, stammering incoherently. No. Impossible. How could this be? Vanguard. Vanguard pulled out? At that exact moment, Eleanor's gold-plated iPhone started ringing. It was her youngest daughter, my sister-in-law. Through the speaker, a hysterical wail echoed. Mom, help me! Security just barged into my office and threw all my stuff into a box. They said there was a direct order from the CEO to fire me. Immediately. Uncle Paul, Aunt Diane, they all got fired from the branch offices. 2. We're being thrown out onto the street in the middle of the night, Mom. Eleanor's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the marble floor. The sequins on her gown scraped against the stone with a sickening rasp. She clutched her head, her eyes bloodshot, staring at me as if I were a monster. You. Who the hell are you? What did you do to my family? I walked right up to her, leaning down, my voice soft but carrying the crushing weight of a collapsing mountain. My dearest mother-in-law, for 3 years, you spent my money on designer bags, bragging to the country club that your son was a genius making millions. Did you ever stop to wonder how an incompetent, low-level sales rep like Julian managed to open a firm and secure $100 million contracts in less than a year? Did you know that the entity keeping this pathetic family afloat is Vanguard Holdings? And that I, Victoria Sterling, am the founder and CEO? My words struck like lightning, exploding in the middle of the ballroom. The guests, the same people who had been mocking me moments ago, stood paralyzed, jaws hanging open. The managing directors of my subsidiaries, who had been sent here to prop up Julian's illusion, stood up in unison, bowed respectfully, and said, in a booming chorus, "Good evening, Miss Sterling." That sight was the ultimate slap to the face of the Vance family. The truth was finally exposed. The glamorous facade they wore had been violently stripped away, revealing them as the cheap parasites they truly were. Chloe, the mistress who was acting so high and mighty, was now trembling, her face completely drained of blood. She realized that the man she was clinging to, the gold mine she thought she had struck, was nothing but a hollow shell. Suddenly, her phone pinged with a text from the bank. The platinum card Julian had given her was frozen. The $50,000 she had just spent at Hermes that afternoon was declined. Chloe stumbled back, shoving Julian away as if he were an infectious disease. Julian was utterly broken. He crawled on the floor, desperately reaching for the hem of my gown. Tori, you're joking, right? You're just teaching me a lesson, right? I know I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I won't divorce you. I'll kick to her out right now. Please, just call Vanguard. Tell them to unfreeze the accounts. That company is my life's work. You can't be this cruel. I yanked my dress out of his filthy grip. I looked down at the man groveling at my feet, feeling not a single ounce of pity. My compassion had been trampled and pulverized by them long ago. All that was left was the coldness of a debt collector. Your life's work? I scoffed. The seed capital was mine. The shares are held by my proxies. The clients were brought in by my network. Even the CEO chair you sit-in was arranged by me. Your life's work consisted of drinking until 3 a.m. and taking luxury vacations with your mistress on my dime. How dare you even utter the words, life's work? I turned to Eleanor, who was still sitting on the floor, muttering like a madwoman. And you, so proud of your superior Vance bloodline, do you finally understand what it feels like to fall from the penthouse into the gutter? Your arrogance, the prestige you built up, all of it was bought with the money of the daughter-in-law you cursed as a barren piece of trash. The ballroom doors swung open once more. This time, it wasn't a guest, but a squad of towering professional private security guards in black suits. They parted the crowd, marching straight to me, forming an impenetrable wall. My assistant, Nathan, was with them, holding a thick stack of documents. He nodded slightly. Miss Sterling, your car is waiting at the entrance. The preliminary procedures are complete. I nodded. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. The sharp clicks of my stilettos echoed with absolute finality. I left behind Julian wailing in agony, Eleanor clutching her chest and passing out, Chloe frantically trying to sneak away, and a mob of Vance relatives shaking in sheer, unadulterated terror. They had lost everything: their umbrella of protection, their livelihood, their fake dignity. Tonight, an empire of lies had collapsed. But for me, Operation Phoenix had only just begun. What they paid tonight was just the interest on the suffering I had endured. Tomorrow, I would personally take back every dollar, every cent, and strip them of the very last things they clung to. I was going to teach them that messing with the grace of a powerful woman is a one-way ticket. Straight to hell. The door of my Maybach closed, and I leaned back against the plush leather seats, closing my eyes. The neon lights of Manhattan blurred past the tinted windows. The purge was merely the prelude. The next morning, the sun rose high, casting brilliant golden rays through the plains. Sheer curtains of a penthouse sitting 60 stories above Central Park. This was my true home. A massive, serene space, completely disconnected from the toxic, chaotic mess of the Vance household. Last night, after leaving the worst anniversary party in history, I came back here and slept deeply. No nightmares, no tossing and turning. It had been 3 years since I slept that peacefully. 3 years, as Julian's wife, meant 3 years locking myself in a cage of endurance, shrinking myself to fit the bottomless ego of a weak, insecure man. But now, I had smashed that cage with my own hands. I woke up, brewed myself a strong cup of black espresso. The bitterness cleared my mind instantly. I walked into my walk-in closet and pulled out a custom-tailored charcoal gray power suit, paired it with a white silk blouse and black Louboutin pumps. My hair was pulled into a sleek, tight bun, my sharp makeup highlighting cold, unwavering eyes. The woman in the mirror was no longer the submissive Tory, dressed in drab clothes, slaving away in her mother-in-law's kitchen. The woman in the mirror was Victoria Sterling, CEO of Vanguard Holdings, a woman who held the power of life and death in the corporate world, ready to reclaim what was hers. At exactly 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. Nathan and my lead attorney, Mr. Miller, were waiting outside. Behind them stood 4 imposing security guards. Mr. Miller handed me a thick binder filled with property deeds, titles for the twos, luxury cars, and financial audits showing the exact amounts Julian had embezzled. I nodded, took the binder, and stepped into the private elevator. Today, I was bringing the purge to the very place they called home. The armored SUV glided smoothly down the highway, heading toward the sprawling Gold Coast estate in Long Island. I had paid $50 million out of pocket for that mansion right before the wedding. I had personally picked out every piece of lice furniture, from the imported Italian leather sofas and the baccarat chandeliers to the specific rose bushes in the garden. I had turned it into a sanctuary so Julian and Eleanor could show off to the world. Instead, they turned it into a den of betrayal, plotting how to bleed me dry. When our convoy pulled up to the massive iron gates, they were locked tight. I motioned for a guard to ring the intercom. It took 5 minutes for the panicked housekeeper to run out and open the gates. Seeing me and my team, she went pale and backed away, trembling. I ignored her, walking with confident strides across the vast driveway, pushing open the heavy mahogany double doors, and stepping into the grand foyer. The scene in the living room was pathetic and chaotic. Eleanor was sitting on Twatty Action, the Persian rug, her hair a rat's nest, her eyes swollen shut from crying all night. Around her were scattered bank statements, likely confirming her frozen accounts. Julian was still wearing his rumpled, wine-stained tuxedo from the Bersanaso night before. Unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes, he was pacing around the room like a caged animal. Meanwhile, Chloe, the mistress, was frantically stuffing designer jewelry, Birkin bags, and cash into a massive Louis Vuitton suitcase in the corner, looking like a common thief. Hearing my heels hit the marble floor, all 3 of them snapped their heads. Around, the massive living room fell into a suffocating silence. The silence of guilty criminals caught red-handed. The silence of absolute terror facing imminent consequences. Julian was the first to react. He charged toward me, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse with a mix of begging and rage. "Tori, why are you here? Wasn't last night enough? You froze my accounts, you got my whole family fired. You've ruined my life. What more do you want?" I stopped, crossing my arms, my icy gaze sweeping across the room. I spoke in a flat, emotionless tone. "I'm here to take my house back. You have 24 hours to pack your personal belongings and get out. Actually, it looks like you won't need 24 hours. Get out of my sight right now." Hearing the words "get out," Eleanor snapped out of her stupor. She scrambled up, stumbling forward, pointing her finger at my face and screaming, "You're kicking me out? This is my son's house. This is the Vance estate. Who the hell? Are you to kick a mother-in-law onto the street? You're an evil, vindictive witch. God will punish you." I laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the high ceilings. "I don't know about God, Eleanor, but the law definitely has eyes." I turned to Mr. Miller and nodded. Mr. Miller stepped forward, opening his briefcase, and read loudly, "Mrs. Vance. Mr. Vance, this estate, including the land and all assets attached to it, was purchased by and is solely deeded to Miss Victoria Sterling. All wire transfers from my client's personal accounts are fully documented. Your residence here, over the past 3 years, was strictly under the permission of my client. As of this moment, that permission is revoked. If you do not vacate the premises, Voluntarily, we will have the Nassau County Sheriff's Department physically remove you for trespassing. Eleanor's face went from beet red to ghost white. She stumbled back, collapsing onto the sofa, muttering incoherently. She had always assumed that because Julian was my husband, my assets were automatically his. She had no idea that, long before the wedding, my legal team had drafted an ironclad prenuptial agreement and kept my premarital assets completely separate. Her ignorance and greed had just slapped her in the face with brutal reality. At that moment, Chloe had managed to drag her suitcase near the door, trying to sneak out during the commotion, but my sharp eyes caught the sleazy maneuver. I signaled the guards. Instantly, two massive men blocked her path, ripped the forting on the suitcase from her hands, and dumped it on the floor. The zipper burst open, spilling diamond necklaces, Rolex watches, and stacks of cash onto the marble. Chloe shrieked, dropping to her knees, desperately trying to claw the items back. I walked over slowly, my stiletto stopping inches from her trembling fingers. I looked down, my voice like a blade. Where do you think you're taking these? I bought these jewels. These bags are limited editions I ordered from Europe. Did you think getting knocked up with a bastard child gave you the right to rob my house? Chloe looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes, trying to play the victim. Tori, Julian bought these for me. You can't take them back. I'm pregnant. If you don't have a heart for me, at least have a heart for the baby. Don't back a mother and child into a corner. Hearing her lecture me on morals made my blood boil. Have a heart? A homewrecker who destroys families, who leeches off my hard-earned money, is telling me to have a heart? I kicked a velvet jewelry box across the room. I don't have time for your fake sermons. Every single item here was purchased using a secondary black card in my name. Julian used my money to keep you as a pet. Now I'm repossessing it. You can leave with the cheap Zara clothes you wore when you first walked in here. Leave the rest. Seeing his mistress humiliated, Julian tried to salvage whatever pathetic shred of manhood he had left. He stepped up and yelled, Tori, you're crossing the line. You're a billionaire. Why do you care about a few bags? Why make things so hard for a pregnant woman? Give her stuff back. I looked at Julian with utter, unadulterated contempt. You feel sorry for her? Then use your own money to buy it for her. Oh, wait, you don't have any money. Even the boxers you're wearing right now were bought with my money. Julian choked, unable to form a single word. The humiliation contorted his face into a pathetic mask. But I wasn't done. The purge had to be absolute. No loose ends. I nodded to Mr. Miller. Keep reading. Mr. Miller cleared his throat and pulled out another document, this one far more severe. Mr. Vance, during our overnight forensic audit of Vanguard Holdings subsidiaries, our financial team uncovered massive irregularities. You utilized your position as CEO to create shell contracts, embezzling over $1 million from corporate funds. You used this money to buy luxury cars, lease a high-end condo in Manhattan for Miss Chloe, and wire funds to your mother for personal expenses. This constitutes grand larceny and corporate fraud. Hearing $1 million in fraud, Julian's knees buckled. He dropped to the floor. Eleanor let out a blood-curdling scream, clutching her chest, gasping for air. I delivered the final blow coldly. Did you hear that? You aren't just walking out of this house with nothing. You are facing a massive federal lawsuit to recover every single dime of that $1 million. The luxury cars in the place, garage, repossessed. Chloe's condo? My lawyers are seizing the lease. Every cent. You swallowed, I will make you vomit back up, even if it means sending you to federal prison. I will not show mercy. Only now did Eleanor truly understand the meaning of fear. Her usual aggressive arrogance evaporated. She crawled across the floor, wrapped her arms around my calves, crying and snotting all over my shoes, begging pathetically, Tori, honey, please, I beg you, I was wrong. I was blind and treated you badly, please. Forgive Julian, spare my family. We can't pay back that kind of money. I'm an old woman, don't throw me on the street, don't send my son to prison. I'll bow. To you, I'll do anything. She started banging her forehead against the marble floor, but my heart had turned to stone. Crocodile tears couldn't sway someone who had endured so much psychological abuse. I coldly pulled my leg out of her grasp. when you humiliated me, when you ordered me out of the house, when you cheered, as your son brought his mistress home. Did you ever think about today, Karma? Mrs. No One. I signaled the security detail to throw them out. They weren't allowed to take a blackspert. Single item of value. Immediately, 4 guards grabbed Julian, Eleanor, and Chloe by the arms and dragged them toward the front door. They screamed, thrashed, and cursed, but resistance was futile. Eleanor was dragged across the threshold, her expensive clothes wrinkled, her hair wild like a beggar's. Chloe clutched her fake belly, screaming in pain, while her eyes remained locked on, the jewelry scattered inside. Julian was entirely broken, his eyes dead, muttering apologies that were 5 years too late. The heavy iron gates slammed shut, locking those 3 pathetic humans out on the street. They had nothing. No home, no money, no dignity, and a massive lawsuit hanging over their heads with the very real threat of federal prison. The punishment fit the crime perfectly. I stood in the vast living room, looking around the empty space. The air felt cleaner without the stench of lies and betrayal. The first phase of the purge was a spectacular success. Assets recovered, the parasites evicted. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Early that morning, while reviewing the financial records for the lawsuit, Nathan had flagged an extremely disturbing anomaly. It was a massive, highly suspicious wire transfer made years ago right around the exact time of the lumberyard fire. The fire that caused me to owe Julian my life, trapping me in this marriage. My business instincts screamed that beneath that mysterious wire transfer was a sickening secret, a horrific truth I had to uncover. That afternoon, after watching the Vance family get thrown onto the street, I got into my car and headed back to Vanguard Holdings headquarters in Manhattan. The city was bathed in the late afternoon sun, crowds bustling along the bathe avenues. Sitting in the back seat, I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. Logically, having exacted my revenge, I should have felt ecstatic. But instead, there was just a cold, hollow emptiness inside me. I didn't mourn the marriage. I was just disgusted by the years of my youth wasted on beasts wearing human skin. The car pulled up to the towering glass skyscraper, the beating heart of Vanguard Holdings, an empire I built from the ground up. As I walked through the Plaza's automatic sliding doors, everyone from security to the receptionist to top executives stopped, stood up, and offered a respectful, "Good afternoon, miss." Sterling. The sound echoed through the massive lobby. I gave a slight nod, striding toward the private executive elevator. It had been 3 years since I wore the armor of a true titan of industry, free from having to bow and hide to protect a fragile man's ego. Upon reaching my top-floor office, I barely sat down in my leather chair when Nathan hurried in. He looked more tense than usual, clutching a bright red folder. At Vanguard, red folders were reserved for emergencies of catastrophic proportion. "Miss Sterling," Nathan began, his voice lowered cautiously. "The internal audit team worked through the night analyzing the historical data of Julian Vance's personal and corporate accounts. For the past 3 years, we mapped every expense, the shell contracts, the embezzled funds, the secret transfers to Chloe and Eleanor. The evidence is airtight. We have enough to hand him to the district attorney for wire fraud and grand larceny." I nodded, taking a sip of water. "Good work. Send the files to legal. Immediately. I want the indictment on the DA's desk by tomorrow morning. They stole from me. I want them bleeding." Nathan didn't step back as usual. He took a deep breath, opened the red folder, and pulled out an old, yellowed bank statement, placing it carefully on my desk. "Miss Sterling, the recent fraud is clear legally, but while pulling historical data, the CFO found a highly alarming trail. It didn't happen during his 3 years as CEO. It happened the month before you and Mr. Vance officially started dating." I frowned, picking up the paper. It was a transaction log from an old, rarely used checking account belonging to Julian. It showed a wire transfer to a bank account under the name Mickey Donovan. The date was October 15th, for $50,000. A second transfer occurred on November 20th for another $50,000, a total of $100,000. $100,000 at that time was an astronomical sum for a low-level sales rep like Julian. I looked up at Nathan, my voice sharp. "Have you identified this account? Why? Would a broke salesman send $100,000 to a stranger? And where did he even Get the money? Nathan bowed his head, his voice filled with suppressed rage. Ma'am, the $100,000 was borrowed from a local loan shark syndicate. As for the recipient, Mickey the Torch Donovan, he isn't a business associate. He's a known arsonist, a gambling addict, and a hitman who takes dirty jobs in the tri-state area. But the most horrifying part isn't just that. He paused, looking me directly in the eyes, every word heavy as lead. November 18th, the date falling right between those two payments, is the exact date of the massive fire at the upstate lumber yard. The fire where you nearly lost your life. And the exact day Mr. Vance played the hero, running into the classed flames to save you. Nathan's words hit me like a thunderbolt. My entire body froze. The paper in my hands trembled violently. The air in the office suddenly felt suffocating. I fell into a terrifying, bone-chilling silence. Memories of that winter night 3 years ago flooded my mind, crystal clear. I had driven upstate to inspect a rush order of export furniture. It was 10 p.m. The massive yard was deserted, save for a few guards. I was reviewing logs in the second-floor office when a massive explosion rocked the paint storage warehouse below. Within seconds, a raging inferno engulfed the building. Thick black smoke poured in, the smell of burning wood and chemicals choking me. I panicked, trying to run down the stairs, but the flames had blocked the exit. The wooden stairs were ablaze. Ceiling beams crashed down. The heat was like Actes. Unbearable, roasting my skin. Retreating to a corner, I coughed violently, sheer terror gripping my mind as I thought I was going to burn alive. Just as I thought I was dead, the office door was kicked open. Through the thick smoke, Julian appeared. He threw a soaked blanket over me, held me tight, and dragged me through the raging fire. We barely made it out before the roof collapsed. At the hospital, I saw the severe second-degree burns on his arms. He looked at me with sincere eyes, smiling and saying, "As long as you're safe, I'd gladly die." In that moment, the frozen heart of a ruthless businesswoman had melted. I cried. Out of sheer gratitude, I believed God had sent me a truly good man, willing to sacrifice his life for mine. Because of that immense debt, I threw away all barriers of status and wealth, hiding my empire to marry him and devote myself to being a good wife. But now, this lifeless piece of paper was slapping me with a truth so cruel it made me nauseous. The fire that almost killed me, the burns on his arms, the sweet words of sacrifice. It was all a meticulously crafted, despicable, theatrical play. I closed my eyes, breathing heavily, bile rising in my throat. I had shared a bed with a demon for 3 years without knowing it. He had investigated my background, realizing I was a massive target. He borrowed money from the mob, hired a hitman to torch the warehouse, pushed me to the brink of death, and then played the savior to steal my gratitude and my heart. A plot so malicious, cold-blooded, and barbaric it defied imagination. Seeing my pale face, Nathan quickly poured me a glass of warm water. "Miss Sterling, are you all right? This is incredibly serious. It goes far beyond a divorce or corporate fraud. If we can prove the connection between Vance and Donovan regarding the fire, he will spend the rest of his life in federal prison for attempted murder." I opened my eyes. The shock and pain were gone. The light burning in my eyes now was the flame of absolute, unadulterated vengeance, the ruthlessness of a queen who had been stabbed in the back. They despised me, stole my money, cheated, and mocked me for being barren. That was enough to strip them of everything. But staging an attempted murder to manipulate my emotions, gambling with my life, that was an unforgivable sin. Deploy every resource, use every connection, and find Mickey Donovan. I ordered, my voice cutting like glass, grinding the words through my teeth. I don't care where he's hiding. Bring him to me. I want to hear the filthy truth, out of his own mouth. Yes, Miss Sterling. Our security intel teams have been tracking him since dawn. After getting the money, Donovan fled to a remote town in West Virginia to hide from the mob over other gambling debts. We have his coordinates. Our extraction team is moving in now. He will be here by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. Excellent. I slammed my hand on the desk, a lethal glint in my eye. Prep the secure soundproof room in the sub-basement. When he gets here, don't call the NYPD yet. I will interrogate him myself. I need ironclad proof recordings, texts, signed confessions. I don't just want Julian bankrupt. I want to personally extinguish his will to live and drag him to the depths of hell. I stood up, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the city lights were flickering to life. The world kept turning, people kept hustling, but inside me, a blizzard was raging. 3 years ago, I traded my pride for a debt of gratitude. 3 years later, I realized it was a blood-soaked trap. I paid a massive price for my naivety and misplaced empathy. But Victoria Sterling was not the type of woman to cover her face and cry when betrayed. The deeper the wound, the more catastrophic the counterattack. Julian, Eleanor, and Chloe thought being homeless and in debt was the worst punishment. No, that was just the warm-up. The Reaper's scythe was now resting against their throats. I turned back to Nathan. Contact the OBGYN clinic Chloe visited. I want her. Entire medical file, ultrasounds, and blood tests. A family willing to commit arson and attempted murder for a wedding ring wouldn't hesitate to fake a pregnancy. I want every dirty secret dragged into the light. Nathan bowed. Understood, Miss Sterling. I'll have it done tonight. When the door closed, I was alone in the vast space. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet. The deep red liquid swirling in the glass looked exactly like the flames from years ago, and exactly like the wine I threw in Julian's face last night. Life's script was sometimes more brutal and absurd than a soap opera. But that was fine. I was going to be the director for the final act of this blood-soaked play. In the sub-basement of Vanguard Holdings, the air was cold and heavy enough to cut with a knife. The soundproof room was lit only by a harsh overhead light, shining directly onto a metal chair bolted to the floor. Mickey Donovan sat, shivering in that chair. His hands were clasped tightly, sweat pouring down his rough forehead, his eyes darting around in absolute panic. He had been snatched by my security team from his rural hideout and driven straight here. I walked into the room, my heels echoing rhythmically on the concrete floor. Nathan followed closely, carrying the red folder and a digital recorder. I pulled up a chair and sat across from Donovan, crossing my legs, my eyes sharp as scalpels, staring down the man who almost burned me alive. The room was deathly silent. Donovan gulped loudly, his chapped lips trembling, too terrified to speak. I nodded. Nathan tossed the bank statements onto the metal table in front of him. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Mickey Donovan, I'm sure you recognize the numbers on this paper. 2 transfers, totaling $100,000 from Julian Vance. The mob is hunting you. If I toss you out the front door, do you think you'd survive the night? Or I can hand you to the FBI for attempted murder. Pick your poison. Hearing attempted murder, Donovan's face lost all color. He threw himself off the chair, dropping to his knees on the freezing floor, babbling and begging. Ma'am, boss, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm just a hired gun, I do what I'm paid. 4 years ago, Julian came to me. He said he was targeting a billionaire heiress, needed to play the hero to win her over. He gave me 50 grand up front, gave me the blueprints to the lumber yard, pointed out the chemical storage, and told me to light the match at exactly 10 p.m. I gripped the armrest of my chair, fighting the volcanic rage in my chest. Every sickening suspicion was confirmed. Julian, the man with the gentle, righteous face, was a demon wearing human skin. He calculated every minute, gambling my life just to step into high society. I demanded, my voice like steel. What else did he promise you? Spit it out. If you hide a single word, you're dead. Donovan frantically dug into his jacket pocket and pulled out a battered, cracked burner phone. I swear I'm not hiding anything. Julian promised me another $500,000 once he married you and got his hands on your accounts, so I could leave the country. But after the wedding, he ghosted me, changed his number, blocked me. I've been running from loan sharks for years because of him. On this phone, I still have the texts where he set up the meet, and an audio recording I secretly took when he handed me the cash. I'll give it all to you. Please, just let me live. Nathan stepped forward, taking the old phone and connecting it to a laptop to extract the data. Minutes later, the audio played clearly. Julian's voice, that subservient yet viciously ambitious tone I knew too well echoed in the room. Listen closely. Light it near the paint storage. When the fire gets big, call me. I'll run in and save her. Make it look real. If she dies, we both go to prison. But if I save her, we're set for life. I closed my eyes, a single, freezing tear rolling down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of weakness. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated fury at having given my blank and Ezenates heart to a cold-blooded beast. I opened my eyes, wiping the tear away. The confession was documented. Donovan signed and fingerprinted the transcripts. With this ironclad evidence, I was going to ensure Julian rotted in a federal penitentiary, never seeing the light of day again. I ordered security to hold Donovan until he could be handed over to the feds, along with the lawsuit files. Returning to my top-floor office, the sky outside was turning a stormy gray. Nathan had just returned from the OB/GYN clinic. His dazed face held a look of supreme disgust and dark amusement. He placed a stack of medical records on my desk. Miss Sterling, just as you suspected, that family is nothing but cheap actors. The clinic confirmed Chloe is not pregnant. That bump she was parading around is a silicone prosthetic. The ultrasounds and blood work she showed them were forged, bought from a black market dealer. I burst out laughing. The bitter, mocking laughter echoed in the vast room. Trash attracts trash. A manipulative con artist ended up with a professional gold digger faking a pregnancy. They used a non-existent fetus to force a divorce and publicly humiliate me for being barren. Now, the curtain was dropping. I wanted to see how they would act when they realized they were just conning each other. I turned to Nathan, a smirk playing on my lips. Take copies of these medical records, along with Julian's official sterility diagnosis that I've hidden for 3 years, and hand-deliver them to whatever rat-infested motel they're crashing at. Let them tear each other apart before the law comes for them. That afternoon, in a dilapidated, roach-infested motel in Queens, moving from a luxury mansion and luxury cars to a cramped, foul-smelling 150-square-foot room, Eleanor, Julian, and Chloe were miserable. Stripped of everything, without a dime to their names, the relatives who used to kiss their feet had blocked their port numbers and vanished. Eleanor sat slumped on a stained mattress, her hair unkempt, groaning and cursing my name, calling me a wicked witch. Julian lay staring at the ceiling, his eyes hollow, unshaven, looking like a zombie. Chloe sat in the corner, clutching her silicone belly, miserable from the heat and the stench. They had no idea true hell was about to drop in. Nathan and 2 massive guards kicked the flimsy motel door open. The 3 occupants shrieked in terror. Without a word, Nathan tossed the medical files directly at Julian's face. A parting gift from our CEO. Read it carefully, you absolute moron. With that, Nathan walked out, leaving a suffocating gloom behind. Julian shakily picked up the papers. His eyes scanned Chloe's lab results. Negative for pregnancy. He blinked, thinking he was hallucinating. He flipped to the next page, his own sperm analysis from 3 years ago. The conclusion was, highlighted, 0 motility, primary sterility. Julian's eyes widened, his breathing ragged, veins popping on his forehead. He snapped his head toward Chloe, his eyes blood red. He threw the papers on the floor, lunged at her, grabbed her hair, and screamed like a maniac. You psychotic bitch. You lied to me. You're not pregnant. That belly is fake. You scammed me into divorcing my wife so you could dig for gold. I'm sterile. I've been sterile for 3 years. How the hell could you be pregnant with my child? Chloe, yelping in pain, fought back ferociously, clawing at Julian's face. During the scuffle, the fake silicone belly shifted and fell onto the dirty floor, revealing her perfectly flat stomach. She let out a shrill, hysterical laugh. Yeah, I lied to you. So what? I thought you were a rich CEO with a mansion and a Porsche. Turns out you're just a pathetic loser living off his wife. You shoot blanks. I had to fake it to stroke your fragile little male ego. So you'd buy me things. Now you have nothing. Why the hell should I serve you? Hearing the commotion, Eleanor grabbed the papers from the floor. She struggled to read them, but she understood enough. The precious grandson she had dreamed of, the weapon she used to humiliate me, was a piece of silicone. And her golden boy, her perfect son, was the one who was barren, not her obedient daughter-in-law. The brutal truth shattered her delusions of grandeur. She let out an agonizing wail, lunged forward, and slapped Chloe across the face with all her might. "You little tramp! You con artist! You ruined my family! You made my son lose everything! I'll kill you!" 3 people, a greedy mother-in-law, a traitorous husband, and a gold-digging mistress were now rolling on the filthy motel floor, scratching, biting, and screaming at each other. Julian slapped Chloe. Chloe clawed Eleanor, and Eleanor cursed Julian for being an idiot. It was a pathetic, humiliating, laughable display. They blamed each other, spitting the most vulgar insults imaginable. Their fake dignity was destroyed, leaving only bottom feeders fighting over garbage. Eventually, Chloe managed to break free, grabbed a bag of her cheap clothes, and sprinted out of the motel, leaving Julian and Eleanor beaten, bruised, and sobbing on the floor in absolute despair. They had smashed their own golden bowl to snatch a piece of fake clay. Now, they had lost their wealth, their reputation, and their fake familial love. When Nathan showed me the security footage of them tearing each other apart, I just smirked. A fitting end. But it still wasn't the final period. Tomorrow, the gavel of justice would be the ultimate strike determining their fate. The next morning, the Manhattan sky was covered in thick, dark clouds. A chilling wind howled past the glass windows of the skyscraper. The gloomy weather outside felt like the harbinger of a massive storm. A storm of justice, ready to wash away 3 years of filth. I sat in my office, sipping a hot cup of chamomile tea. The aroma relaxed my chamomile mind. All the evidence, the financial audits, the wire fraud proof, and the red-inked confession from Mickey Donovan regarding the arson had been submitted to the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office at dawn. Julian's doomsday had arrived. Just then, Nathan burst in, looking annoyed. "Miss Sterling, there's a disturbance in the lobby. Julian Vance is down there throwing a fit. Security was going to throw him out, but he's screaming that he has to see you. He claims he has a classified dossier regarding your late father. He's threatening to leak it to the press and ruin the Sterling family name if you don't see him. Should we just call the NYPD?" I slowly set my teacup down, my brow furrowing slightly. My late father? This desperate piece of trash was at the end of his rope, and he dared to use my deceased father as a shield? Julian's depravity truly had no limits. I thought a few scraps of paper could threaten a woman who had already walked through the valley of the shadow of death. I smiled a smile as cold as winter ice. "Don't call the beat cops, bring him up. Here. I'm very curious to hear what a cornered rat sounds like before it's trapped. Have security lock down the floor," I added. "I'm nailing his coffin shut. Today." 5 minutes later, the heavy oak doors swung open. 2 massive bodyguards dragged Julian in and tossed him onto the wool rug. Julian looked horrifyingly pathetic. His clothes were filthy and smelled of sour sweat. His eyes were sunk deep into his skull, bloodshot and wild. His hair was a greasy mess. He looked nothing like the polished executive. He was just a repulsive, desperate vagrant. He scrambled up, clutching a worn manila folder tightly to his chest like a life preserver. He looked up at me, his eyes burning with a mix of madness, hatred, and deep-seated terror. The room was suffocatingly silent. I remained in my LEN chair, hands steepled, staring down at him like a bug. "Tori, you played me! You played me hard!" Julian screamed, his voice cracking. "You cold-blooded witch! You hid your identity. You set a trap to back me into a fade corner. You froze my accounts, threw my mother on the street, got my family fired. You even sent those medical records to humiliate me. Are you happy now? Are you satisfied?" I didn't answer immediately. I stood up, taking slow, deliberate steps toward him. The click of my heels echoed like a metronome, making Julian flinch and step back. I stopped in front of him, my voice chillingly calm. "I played you? Did I force you to cheat? Did I force you to embezzle corporate funds to pay for your mistress? Did I force you to insult the wife who took care of you? No, Julian. Your own greed, cowardice, and filthy nature dragged you to hell. I just lifted the blindfold off my own eyes so I could see the monster I owed my life to. Oh, wait. Even that life-saving debt was bought with my own blood. Hearing the words bought with my blood, Julian violently flinched as if struck by lightning. His face turned an ashen gray, his hands shaking violently. He knew I had his darkest secret. But in a desperate display of stubbornness, he launched his final, pathetic counterattack. He slammed the manila folder onto the glass coffee table. He pointed at it, letting out a hysterical, manic laugh. Don't get too arrogant. You think you're arrogant. So high and mighty, so clean. Your family is just as dirty. Look closely. This is the eminent domain file from the Southside real estate project 10 years ago. Your father was the lead developer. There's proof in here of illegal evictions, violated zoning laws, driving families into poverty, people committed suicide. Over this, Julian took a deep, ragged breath, glaring at me. I found this in a box in the old storage unit. I kept it as an insurance policy. If you don't drop the lawsuit immediately, if you don't give me the house back and fund my company, I'm sending this to the New York Times. I'll put it all over Twitter. I'll destroy Vanguard Holdings and ruin the Sterling legacy. You'll be just as destroyed as I am. He panted, waiting for me to panic. He waited for me to break down, to fall to my knees and beg him to keep the secret. Instead, I stood there, crossed my arms, and looked at him with profound pity. The pity you reserve for someone who is too stupid to realize they've already lost. I picked up the yellowed folder, flipped through the pages, and let them flutter to the ground, scattering over Julian's shoes. I laughed, a bright, ringing laugh that echoed through the room, tearing away. His fake confidence. You really are pathetic, Julian. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Do you think a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund like Vanguard is? Built on a foundation so weak that your garbage files could topple it? Your ignorance is truly a masterpiece. Julian stared, dumbfounded, his lips trembling. What are you talking about? Aren't you afraid of your father's reputation being ruined? I took a step closer, leaning down to look straight into his terrified eyes. I spoke clearly, cutting him to the bone. Listen to me closely. Yes, there were disputes on that project a decade ago. But immediately after, my father took full public responsibility. He compensated every displaced family at 3 times the market value. All the zoning violations were submitted to the city planning board and the EPA for transparent processing. Our family paid tens of millions in federal fines to rectify the situation. Every legal settlement, every payout, is public record, filed at the state archives. I paused, watching the remaining color drain from Julian's face. Those old drafts you stole? They hold 0 legal weight. You want to send them to the scrapped Times? Go ahead. The journalists will laugh in your face for bringing up a dahlia. Settled, decade-old case. You thought you could blackmail a billionaire CEO with recycled trash? You brought a knife to a gunfight. Julian's legs gave out completely. He collapsed onto the floor. His final life preserver had just been popped. He grabbed his hair, letting out a pathetic whimper. He realized he had lost. Totally, humiliatingly, with absolutely nothing left. He had no talent, no intellect, and now, his dirtiest trick was just a foolish joke. But my punishment didn't end with mockery. The true final blow was about to strike. Right on cue, the wail of police sirens pierced the air outside the skyscraper. The blaring noise struck Julian's heart like a death knell. He whipped his head toward the window, then back to me, shaking like a leaf. What did you do? You called the cops? You're actually going this far? He stammered, spit flying from his mouth. I stood tall, adjusting my blazer, exuding absolute authority. I didn't call the police for your pathetic blackmail attempt. I called them to settle a blood debt from 3 years ago. You thought I was just going after your assets and your mistress? No, Mickey Donovan is in custody. He confessed to everything. From the $100,000 you borrowed from the mob, to your explicit orders to burn down the lumber yard and trap me inside. The texts, the audio, the wire, transfers, it's all in the hands of the FBI. Hearing Mickey Donovan's name, Julian looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He let out a horrifying guttural scream. He dragged himself across the floor, grabbed my ankles, and slammed his head against the floor until his forehead bled onto my rug. Tori, please, I beg you, let me live. I was wrong. I'm an animal, but please, remember the 3 years we were married. Don't send Me away for attempted murder? I'll die in federal prison. My mom is old, she won't survive seeing me in a cell. I'll be your slave for the rest of my life? Just please! I coldly kicked my leg, sending him sprawling backward. Tears from a reptile. Made me sick. 3 years of marriage? For 3 years you leeched off me, cheated on me, and trampled my pride. When you ordered Donovan to light that fire, did you think about my life? When you brought your mistress home to force a divorce, did you care about our marriage? Now you beg for your life? It's too late. The cure for your sociopathy is a prison cell. The office doors swung open. 4 FBI agents and NYPD detectives in suits and tactical gear entered. The lead agent held a warrant stamped by a federal judge. Nathan pointed at Julian. Officers, that is the suspect. Julian Vance. The lead agent stepped forward, his voice booming. Julian Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree arson, wire fraud, and grand larceny. Stand up. Place your hands behind your back. Any resistance will be met with force. 2 agents hauled Julian to his feet. The cold steel cuffs clicked around his cop's brace. Wrists. That metallic snap was the final nail in the coffin of his freedom. Julian wailed, tears and blood mixing on his face, looking utterly disgusting and pitiful. He was dragged out of the office. All the way down the hall and into the elevator, he screamed my name, begging and cursing. Dozens of Vanguard employees stood by the glass walls, watching the former husband of their CEO being dragged away like a rabid dog. Not a single person felt pity, only deep contempt. I stood silently by the window, hands clasped behind my back, watching the armored police transport pull away from the building, sirens blaring into the drizzling rain. The trash had been taken out. The monsters had received their death sentence. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool, crisp air. My chest felt impossibly light. A massive boulder that had been crushing my lungs for 3 years was finally gone. No more resentment, no more playing the poor, submissive wife. I had taken back everything: my money, my dignity, and most importantly, I had taken back Victoria Sterling. 3 months after Julian was hauled away from Vanguard Holdings in handcuffs, the federal trial concluded at the Manhattan Federal Courthouse. The morning of the sentencing, the sky was clear, the sun shining brightly over the courthouse steps, washing away the gloom of the past. I attended as the primary victim, wearing a sharp black suit, my hair pulled back, my aura calm and commanding. Nathan and my legal team flanked me. As I entered the courtroom, all eyes turned to me, but I didn't care. My heart was as calm as an autumn. Lake no hatred, no pain. I was just here to watch the hammer of justice fall. At 8 a.m., the judge entered. The courtroom stood. After the formalities, the heavy wooden doors opened, and U.S. Marshals led Julian to the defendant's table. After just 3 months in lockup, he was unrecognizable. He was emaciated, his nautiana cheekbones jutting out from a pale face, his head shaved. He wore an oversized orange jumpsuit, shuffling in leg irons and handcuffs. The arrogance was gone, replaced entirely by hollow, desolate despair. When his eyes accidentally met mine, he quickly looked away, his entire body trembling. Sitting in the gallery was Eleanor. She looked pathetic, wearing a frayed, oversized sweater, her graying hair uncombed and wild. Her face was etched with deep lines of suffering. Seeing her precious son in chains, she wailed loudly. The sound echoed through the solemn courtroom, tragic but deeply ironic. 3 years ago, she enabled his cruelty and abused her daughter-in-law. Now, her belated tears couldn't wash away their sins. The federal prosecutor read the charges, detailing the embezzlement, the wire, fraud, and the horrifying climax, paying a hitman to commit arson and attempted murder, risking my life to manipulate my emotions and steal my empire. The evidence was irrefutable. Julian didn't even mount a defense. He slumped at the table, muttering useless apologies, crying for leniency, but I remained silent. My silence was his ultimate punishment. My heart was permanently closed to the preaser, beast who gambled with my life. The federal judge delivered the sentence. Given the heinous, premeditated nature of the crimes, Julian Vance was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison without the possibility of early parole, alongside full restitution of the stolen funds. Mickey Donovan received 15 years. The bang of the gavel was the final period in Julian's story. 20 years in a Caniana plain. Concrete box. He would bury his youth and his future behind cold iron bars. As the marshals dragged him away, Eleanor screamed his name until her voice gave out, collapsing on the courtroom floor. Not a single relative came to help her. They had all cut ties, terrified of the massive debt and the scandal. Following the trial, the traitors hit rock bottom. Eleanor's assets were seized to pay restitution. She was evicted from her cheap motel. The woman who used to brag at country clubs was now homeless, pushing a shopping cart through the outskirts of the city. Whenever she walked past a nice house, she wept bitterly, knowing she had personally destroyed the golden life she was handed. As for Chloe, the mistress with the silicone belly, she fled with her few pieces of jewelry, only to fall victim to a European scam ring that robbed her blind. Penniless and indebted to dangerous loan sharks, she lived in constant terror in the city's slums, hiding from violent collectors. She used deception to steal and was ultimately destroyed by deception. Poetic justice. On a peaceful weekend afternoon, I drove myself to a quiet, pristine cemetery in upstate New York, where my father was buried. I laid a bouquet of white lilies by his granite headstone and gently wiped the dust from his engraved name. I stood there for a long time, the cool wind brushing through my hair. "Dad," I whispered, a profound peace in my voice. "It's over. The people who hurt me, who tried to steal the legacy you built, they paid the price." I used to think that being patient and forgiving would give me a simple, happy family. But I was wrong. Misplaced kindness is just bait for greedy monsters. I was weak, blindly trusting a fake debt of gratitude. But I'm awake now. I'll never let anyone trample on my pride again. I will stand tall, run vanguard, and make you proud. The wind rustled the pine trees, like a gentle response from beyond. I took a deep breath, feeling all the past trauma vanish with the clouds. Walking away from that rotten marriage, I didn't lose anything of value. I only lost a parasitic man and a fake family. What I gained was my freedom, a brutal lesson in judging character, and my best self. I got back into my car and headed toward the city. The glass skyscrapers gleamed. In the setting sun, New York was bustling, relentless, and full of life. That night, I stood by the massive window of my penthouse, holding a glass of wine, looking down at the world below. I didn't need a fake shoulder to lean on, nor did I need a Mrs. title as an accessory. I am Victoria Sterling, a powerful CEO holding the fate of thousands in my hands. A woman's true peace doesn't come from finding a rich or gentle husband. True peace lies in a sharp mind, financial independence, and a heart strong enough to pick things up and ruthless enough to drop them when necessary. The sky was beautiful tonight, and my life was just beginning a brilliant, free new chapter.